Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's conference on the future of music. So what we're going to do, we've got a nice structure set up. We've got our speakers and our teams, okay? So I'm going to hand over firstly to the speaker of Team 1 and we'll move through each team as we go, everyone having a chance to speak. By all means contribute by raising the hand and the speaker will invite you to contribute, all right? So the first one we're going to discuss, the first speaker is going to be from Team 1, and we're looking at independent music and the future of independent music. So, Team 1 speaker, I'll hand over to you.
That's me. My area was how to independently fund and distribute your own music. So, I think advertising yourself is really important. Advertising in music is the process of raising awareness and building fan base of your music. By correctly marketing your music, you're getting people to know that your music is out there. It's a really crucial thing as record labels, big commercial record labels won't sign you unless you have a proven following. Which makes it really hard for smaller artists to make a living out of music. And there are many ways that you can get yourself out there, such as performing gigs. People like Dave Grohl have said that the best thing you can do to get yourself out there is performing your music. Also letting local radio stations and social networking sites know of your music can be really helpful as well. Something that could potentially make this harder is something called paywall, which is when you can't view something because you need to subscribe or pay for it. So like Netflix or Apple News, you have to have a subscription and pay for it. This follows with Spotify as well. Which doesn't pay their artists enough. So one song is probably 5p, which again makes it really difficult for smaller artists to make a living. Another way of getting yourself signed is by independent records. They're known by indie records. They kind of separate themselves from commercial record labels, and it's more of a kind of do-it-yourself Kickstarter. That's what I really have.
Okay, thank you. Just to hand it over to the floor for a moment, and particularly members of Team 1, is there anything you'd like to contribute or add to what Jess has outlined there?
Nothing on my mind at the minute.
Okay. What about, so interesting you're talking about different platforms like Spotify and the kind of paywall issue of having to subscribe and having to set up kind of subscription to access music. That's obviously kind of a technological, I guess it's kind of a technological development in the industry, but it's also social in some ways, isn't it? Because what the industry is doing, and let me know if you disagree, but what the industry is doing there is kind of allowing the market or the society really to shape distribution, because clearly Spotify is convenient. Things like that are convenient for the consumer on a more social market level. Anyone got any thoughts on that, the movement of music distribution to these kind of platforms, Spotify, digital platforms?
Don't you think there's different sorts of paywall? How would you compare Bandcamp to Spotify or to Patreon?
Yeah, well, I mean, Bandcamp and Patreon are more led by the kind of the people using it, whereas Spotify is more the people who own Spotify, and like a bunch of people like sat around a table deciding what goes on and what doesn't. Whereas Patreon is more like for the artists, I would say, more than Spotify.
And just to like follow up that question, do you think that's a good thing, and do you think that's part of the future?
I think so. Yeah, I think it would be nice to see the following that Spotify has go over to somewhere like Patreon or Bandcamp, where it's much more acceptable and accepting of different people's music.
I like how you put the onus on the audience there. It's an interesting point.
Okay, anyone got anything else to contribute on the area of independent music? Any thoughts? Let's open up to everyone. Okay, thank you very much. Little round of applause for our first speaker. Okay, so now we're going to shift on to team 2. So we're looking at the future of live performance and touring, okay, as an area of the music industry. So who's our speaker for team 2? Okay, gents, take it away.
Okay. Alright. Well, we have got Team 2. It's about like live performance and sustainability in the music industry. So I'd like to start off with saying live performance. Currently, it hit a bit of a rock bottom during lockdown because COVID lockdown, people weren't allowed to go out and see things, and that in turn encouraged more artists to focus on releasing stuff online rather than doing live performances, obviously as you weren't able to. And I see that staying that way towards the future of the music industry with more development in technology. I believe that we'll see more artists recording and releasing music online rather than live gigs and band work.
I'm going to talk about COVID. One of the main things in COVID was obviously transport, and such as flights, taxis, all that thing. So that led to, again, linking into live performance, not being able to get to gigs, perform gigs, and everything was kind of done online because that's the only way it could happen. And that kind of brings us into live streaming, where you could go on Twitch or stream on YouTube your performances, get viewers, and that's how you make money through lockdown, rather than going out and actually performing, because even if you travelled, you'd have to do an isolation period after that travel, which would further delay everything. So COVID really affected everyone, but in the music industry, it put physical sales down by 11%, and everything was just done more electronically, because that's how you could only do it.
So I'd like to talk about security now. And security, you may think security, that's not really that big of a deal, but it is a big deal, and we have seen that recently there was a O2 Arena in Brixton. There was too many people in it and it's collapsed. And there's been a couple dead from it. And it was, well, I don't know if there's set facts, but people believe that it was because the security, there was a lot of security for the gig, because it was an Afrobeats gig, and you could say that the hosts were sort of stereotyping the way that the gig was going to be held, and they put more security on because they stereotyped the music and the genres, which is not okay, obviously, and we don't want to be seeing that in the music industry. And then in turn, the guards were taking bribes and letting in more people than should have been allowed, because there's a capacity for a reason. And because of this, the O2 Arena, it collapsed a bit, and people have now been fatally injured for it and even dead. So when setting up gigs, security, it is a key point that you need to look after, and you have to have trusted, and it's something that there's a fine line where you can't have too little, otherwise people just walk in, do whatever they want, but you can't have too much, where the fact that you won't be able to control them all, and they will take bribes and so forth, and then it will ruin the gig because you have too much people there. Sustainability. Let me just get this up. So sustainability, with the way the world is moving towards a more eco-friendly and sustainable environment, incorporating more use of renewable energies, this is giving us as young musicians the choice to start declining gigs that don't offer the use of sustainable energy and power to run everything that is needed. Things that require energy is amps, your mixing decks, your monitors, your strobe lights, the venue that's hosting, and with the world increasing its rate of renewable energy sources, this allows us young musicians to, well, as I said, decline gigs. And I don't know about you guys, but I am quite passionate about the trying to get the world into a cleaner and safer space with things like using biofuels and solar energy. And for the increase that is happening and the way more people are getting brought to light on the issues affecting global warming, this is big for the music industry, because I now will, when I'm older doing these gigs, I'll be sure that I'll be using renewable energy, and it gives me a peace of mind that I can perform this gig, have fun, and also be helping towards the bigger picture and slowing down rates of global warming as best as I can. All good? Okay. Thank you very much for listening. Any questions?
Okay, let's kick off with any more of Team 2. Is there anything anyone else from Team 2 wants to contribute to what's been covered?
Basically everything, yeah.
Pretty good. Yeah. Okay. So, any questions? Okay, so opening up more widely, is anyone got any other points to contribute to the issues facing live performance and touring in the future? Some interesting stuff there about the kind of ways in which lockdowns and the COVID pandemic changed the way people share music, both live and recorded. But you were talking about live. Do you think do we think, and you think as well, do you think that is going to have a knock-on effect? Do you think now that those kind of platforms have opened, people are going to lean towards them, maybe because they're more economically sustainable than live touring? I know there's been a lot said recently about the difficulty of making money in the live circuit these days. So how do you see, or how does anyone see in the future, the kind of things that happened during the pandemic affecting the way live performance is done in the future or delivered in the future?
Well, I think because of COVID, not necessarily for the environment-wise about live performing, but I think the way that how all these streaming platforms are getting more listeners every day, every month, every year, they're making more money probably from online sales. So I think live performing, because it was it was a big thing, and then it kind of went down during lockdown with the physical sales going down. I think everyone's going to switch to such as Spotify or SoundCloud or whatever, because not really for the environment. I don't think people are thinking like that, but I think because there's more listeners there, and that's how they'll get their following better.
And what about performance?
What about it?
What do you think? So, do you think, say, live streaming will become a more prominent way of performing in the future than, say, physical touring?
I don't think live streaming will be as popular. I think I don't know, it's a bit of a tricky one, this, because there's some people who do like live performing and they want to perform on stage, but it depends. I think it all comes on to personal preference, really, in that matter.
Well, on that note then, personal preference, can I just have a show of hands? How many here would personally prefer to see a gig streamed live than going to an actual live gig? Hands up if you'd prefer that. Okay, hands up if you would prefer going to a gig at a physical live event. Okay, great. Zeno, why? Why would you prefer going physically to a live event than live streaming?
Because, I mean, the feeling of the music is a thing, isn't it, that you wouldn't be able to get through live stream. And if you're going to see a musician that you really like, you could say that you've actually seen them. You know, you've been in their near vicinity.
So there's an element of it being an event, right?
Yeah.
Being part of the event, it's not just the music, but it's the whole event.
So the experience.
Yeah.
The experience of it. Nice.
But if I could just
Yeah, of
interject, so we said it's down to personal preference, but it's more down to the artist. And with all these artists we're seeing nowadays, they're growing up. Us currently are the younger generation. We are growing up with this increase in technology, and right now, we would like to go see gigs, but these artists who are hosting the gigs, they might stop hosting these gigs, and just because there's this change in technology, we could be, when we're older, technology could be so amazing that we wouldn't want to host these gigs and tour around, and we would want to do it all live stream. But it is up to the artists whether they want to host these gigs or whether they just want to carry on just recording and producing music online and just uploading it there and calling it a day there and not doing these live gigs.
Okay, that's a great point. I'm gonna put something out there to you, and I want a bit of kickback from this, really. Okay, I'm gonna make a prediction, right? This is my prediction. I'm gonna predict that in the future, you will have more live streamed events than you will physical live performance events. And this is my prediction as to why, right? This is why I think so. And you've kind of covered it a little bit, actually. Is I think what will happen is the market will force it. That because technology will become so convenient and easy, it will become easier to have bigger audiences and set up things like subscriptions and paywalls so that people can make money performing online as opposed to in a physical space. The market, the economics will drive that because it will become more affordable to do it. And what I think is that the consumers and us as a society will actually fall in line with that and we'll accept it to the point where it will become unusual to go to a live event and people won't really know that experience that you're talking about, so it won't matter to them. I think that's going to be what happens in the music industry.
I know that we're obviously specifically talking about the music industry, but I agree with what you're saying, but I think that that's more likely to happen in the sports world than the music industry, because it's, again, going back to what Zeno said, you can't recreate that feeling of being actually there. And I think that is similar for sports, but I think it's more likely that going to a game or going to watch whatever sport you're going to see will become less likely, and watching it live streamed will be more like the thing than. But that's just, I think, I don't see it happening with music, but I see it happening with sports a lot.
Can I add to Jess's point there, actually, because I can give you a case study on that. Quite a few years ago now, sort of 7 or 8 years ago, there was a project launched in Taunton, because there is an issue with live venues, the pub venues. When you've got an international sport thing on, they've got the large screens and they get a lot of revenue, don't they? If you think about even before Christmas, there was a lot of talk about the train strikes affecting revenue because people were travelling to watch together sport in pubs and venues and like that. And then some pubs as well decided not to because of the human rights record and all the rest of it. But in Taunton, there's an awful lot of sports pubs. And there was a studio that set itself up, and they had a studio and they had a broadcast system from it. And they set up a series of gigs where they got local bands in, and they would film the bands and live stream them out to each one of these pubs. And they signed up and they bought in a subscription and they showed these bands. And the idea was that people would go to the venues, and when there wasn't an international sports thing on, they'd still use the big screens, but they'd all be watching bands perform from this studio. We tried it once. It really, they ended up going bankrupt. It didn't work financially. People just weren't interested. It didn't have the same kind of draw.
Well, let me be a bit provocative and put this out there, devil's advocate. Hands up if you've seen more music on YouTube, Netflix, or a live streaming platform than you have physical gigs. Okay, well, what does that tell us potentially about the way we consume live performance? I mean, you know, that's interesting, isn't it? More people see the pyramid stage of Glastonbury from their homes than they do from the fields.
Mm.
You know, in reality,
It's because the tickets sell out so quick.
right?
We all go for good.
Yeah.
And they're probably people are priced out as well, right? It's
Like,
expensive.
everyone wants to do it. It's not like,
Yeah, but to go to live music, it's an awful lot of effort and it's very expensive.
I think adding on from that as well, I think because of that, how so many things are streamed and so many things are put on social media and whatnot, I think going to a live gig for people or going to see live music in general would make it more special for them. It'd make it more like something they'd want to go to rather than like you go on YouTube and watch the same performance that they're doing for free in your own time.
I get that in theory, but I put it to you that you prefer watching music from the comfort of your own home than you do spending money and going out to support live musicians.
But to add on to that, you have to ask why do we consume so much more of it on YouTube than we do actually going to it? And that's because why does anybody go to any live gig? Is because they've seen it on YouTube, they've seen it on social media, and they're like, oh, that looks good, and then they go.
Nice point. Nice
So
point.
I think it is a really, not a difficult conversation, but I think there's lots to be talked about.
There is, and it's a conversation we've got to face, right? If we want to be the future of this industry, we've got a responsibility in shaping this. Like, there is a potential. We are at a bit of a crossroads at the moment where it could go either way. You know, what kind of music industry do you want in the future? Do you want people to gather to an event, or do you want this? You know, and so there's economics in that. There's you as artists might have the responsibility of helping to shape the direction there. Zena.
I wouldn't be surprised if what you're saying does happen, if live performing does sort of fade out a bit, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it completely comes back in, because like we saw earlier, we all put our hands up when you said who would prefer to see a live gig, and much like records, you know, they went out of fashion and they came back in.
Great point.
I think live seeing an artist live is a thing that everybody wants to do, and I think it would come back in because it's such a thing to do.
Great point. So the question then is, what are the barriers to going to live events? Because there must be. If all of you are putting your hands up to say you've seen more gigs on YouTube or Netflix, or what are the barriers to going to see more live events? Maybe that's something we need to think about and address.
Well, there's loads of barriers that could be in that, such as like pricing, dates, times, where you are at that time, how to get there. You need to sort out age, yeah. You need to sort out where you're going to stay, how long you're staying there for, where you're going to get your food from, everything like that. You've got to add in so many factors. Whereas if you just click on your phone and go onto YouTube, it's such an easy access. All it requires is your battery power and Wi-Fi, rather than any money at all. So,
Be interesting to know, and maybe this is something to look up to report, because you all keep professional blogs, don't you? So it'd be interesting for you to report on those, what the percentages are in attendance at music events right now compared to other times in history, and what the trend might be looking like for the future.
And the cost of tickets,
Yeah.
rising cost of tickets with the cost of
I
living.
think like going to live performances are like going to die out. Because it's like saying would you rather go to a restaurant or make food at home? It's more convenient to make food at home. But like everyone's always going to want to go out for food. I don't know.
You'll always do both, I think.
Yeah,
basically.
I don't think it's ever going to die
One of
out.
them's out of convenience, one of them's out of something because you want to do it. You know.
And I guess then the question is for artists and producers of music and people within the touring industries, you're always going to do both, but what kind of direction do you want to take in terms of shaping the future of the industry within your part of it? So are there ways, for example, that we can make live touring more feasible, more economically viable, not just for the artists, but also for the wider audiences? Might be an interesting problem to solve there in the future. All right, great. One last point, right?
Well, I just thought of something there, but linking with what we had, sustainability, we'll see more sustainability with live streaming gigs rather than doing these in-person live venues where they won't be as sustainable. So it may not be a question of whether we want to go and see it, but it may be a question of can we actually, if it isn't sorted out the way that which the world uses this energy and the carbon footprint people leave to get to these gigs, like people travel, even just Glastonbury Festival, you have people travelling from different countries on planes and they drive miles in cars and they're sat in the traffic for hours, and if you have all your diesel cars, it's just loads and loads. But so it may be, is it sustainable to hold these live venues, or are we forced into having to do it all via live streams and online? So
that's a powerful question and a really pertinent question, because that's not just the future of the music industry, is it? That's the future of our global society. That's a brilliant point. Okay, and there's one last thing actually that you brought up, Blade, that I just want to just cover a minute before we move on. And that was, you were talking about this incident in Brixton at the Afrobeats event. And you were talking about stereotyping, the need to hire extra security, expectations. The music industry's seen a lot of that, hasn't it, in the past? You know, even if you go back to the rock and roll era, and you know, the idea that it was ungodly to shake your hips on stage or sing rock and roll, you know, the devil's music. Musical genres, but also the cultures surrounding those genres have always been a point of contention. There's always been movements in music, cultural movements in music, that have led to backlash or stereotyping or judgment, social judgment of a kind, you know. Interesting your thoughts about where we are with that and what the future is there, you know. What can we do to alleviate or eradicate from this industry some of those kind of social issues, those stereotypes, those negative connotations with music and culture?
I just got a little case study there locally. Post-pandemic, Glastonbury had some very, very big issues with drum and bass nights for under 18s, where there was a lot of infiltration by county lines and things like that, and a lot of messy things happening. And that meant that a lot of the venues stepped back from that and said, we are not going to have any under 18 events now. And of course, having under 18s just on the streets, which is what happens a lot in Glastonbury, rather than having them all in a place that's organised where they're going to have fun and people, you know, it's much safer to have them in a venue. We went and worked with a local venue, and one of our ex-students has set up a company which runs under 18 events in such a way that people can go and join drum and bass in a safe way. But the stigma of that particular genre was very much, they identified heavy metal and drum and bass as being problematic genres. Now, heavy metal really isn't. Quite often heavy metal gigs are the sweetest vegetarian people you ever meet. But the drum and bass thing was very much perceived because there was a lot of drug culture involved and some of the issues. So in terms of community projects, this was a community project. They worked it and they've set up a company, these ex-students that are running this, and they've run quite a few nights successfully. But there's a lot of risk and a lot of security involved, particularly when you talk about minors, and a lot of responsibility. So it's not an easy solution, but there we've got some local case studies where, case in point, they said we're no longer having drum and bass evenings.
So any thoughts on this? The intersection between culture and musical genre or music, and then the wider society stereotyping or judgment of these musical, cultural movements.
I don't think you can separate culture from the genre. I think that's a really difficult thing to do, and as soon as you do that, I think it becomes a bigger issue. Like Dan said about the under 18 drum and bass nights that they've started running. I think obviously you said that it's worked, but I think as soon as you attempt to kind of pull apart the genre and the culture, I think it's easier to kind of work with it than try and kind of disrupt it and pull it apart a lot.
Quite often genre comes from culture.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you say, you can't separate.
Yeah.
Interesting. Quite often in the past, genres have gone full circle and become mainstream. They were once like on the fringes of the industry, they've become more mainstream, and culture can do that too. What do you see being the trends or developments of genre and cultural influence in music in the future? What do you think is going to become very mainstream potentially in the future that might be more on the fringe or less mainstream now?
I'm not sure. I think things will die down a lot, but I think they'll just die down, not many things will come up. So I think like, I was going to say stuff about drum and bass, how like a lot more artists put that more online than live performance, but I've done that now. But I think more genres will rather go down in popularity, but none will really spike up a lot. I think it's going to stay relatively the same, just some of them will die out.
Interesting. Okay, we'll move on from there. That might be something to think about and consider when you write your responses up to this conference today in your professional blogs. Okay. So, Team 3, we're on to a studio recording now. The future of studio work and studio recording. So, who are our speakers for Team 3?
Me.
Okay, I'll hand over to you.
So, the future of studio, the biggest step back in the use of studio from the COVID is you can't get there in the same way. But if you do it at home, you can stay at home and do it, and it's easier at home. And looking back to the golden age of rock, where everyone used studios, we see that studios actually boosted different styles of music. An example would be Stax Studios, which not only brought back voice into mainstream music, also brought us soul music, including artists like Otis Redding and Booker T. Another reason for a lack of studios is the price and how it's increasingly difficult for up-and-coming artists with no money to rent out studio spaces because they're very expensive. Artists and bands still often use the studios, but there's definitely a clear and noticeable downfall of the use of studios, and it's made it clear that the future of studios is slowly becoming bleak.
The golden age of media streaming. In the early 90s, Starlight Networks were the first organisation to stream video on demand, and in the early noughties, Rhapsody was the first website to offer a library of digital music for a subscription. One other website for note is Napster, which caused international drama when they launched a streaming service that caused a fast dip in global record sales. It was not long before the major record labels got together to shut down the service at its height of 50 million members. Today, the most popular streaming services for music are Spotify at 456 million active users, Apple Music with 88 million subscribers, and Tidal, who, unlike the former two services, are known to pay the artists that do well on their sites.
And then the future of synchronization. So I think that synchronization will be used more in games and films, as films are becoming less popular. Maybe short films a bit more. And I also think that will be used a lot more on TikTok by like smaller artists, because TikTok are going to do an experiment where they see how well it would run without big record labels. So I think it would be used a lot more on TikTok, like certain songs would be used only for certain people and stuff like that.
Home recording. Home recording has become a more and more desirable alternative to studio recording in the modern era. As good quality gear becomes more and more accessible, the home recording studio has quickly gained popularity recently, and trips to professional studios have become rarer and rarer because of its convenience and also the independence it gives to the musician. At a home studio, you do not need to follow any rules or schedules and let the creative juices flow. In the future, I think that home recording will experience even more popularity than it is currently. However, I still think that studio sessions have their place. For example, a live band will find it very hard to record from their home as there is little space available to them. However, solo artists will begin to choose a home recording more often than one from a studio. I think because the empowerment and independence that it grants them.
Some of the positives and negatives of studio recording is, one of the negatives is it costs a lot per hour, and access to high equipment may come at an even greater cost. Working under pressure, like, because you only have your time slot and you got to work within that time slot and get it finished in that time slot, and you have to plan out your time, restricting the creative process. You may have to transport all your gear to the studio as well. But some of the positives are professional sound, as they have better equipment because it will cost more, and you might be able to use a producer from the studio, saving you the work of mixing your own albums and getting high quality recording. And there's probably better acoustics, like an acoustic environment, dedicated rooms to record like drums, vocals and guitar. This brings clarity and quality to your recording. Access to professional top-end equipment is also a plus. Access to instruments you may not own and need in your consumption, and you have full focus on the composition and performance, no stress on the mixing and engineering, access to professional session musicians, professional opinion, and sometimes it is even good to get a second opinion on your work to get a fully perfect song.
Positives and negatives of home recording. Positives. You have as much time as you like. You can record whenever you want. There is no pressure or anything, and it can be cheap. It's less hassle, so you don't need to like travel. You're in a nice environment, so you're in like your own home and you're in isolation. Negatives. Good equipment costs a lot. Bad acoustics and all that. Had to learn. Not everyone is an expert at DAWs. Poor sound quality. Okay, AI music. Okay. So there's a huge question about whether AI music is like changing the music industry. I think the days of debating whether it is changing is like over, because it's already like making a big impact on songwriting, producing, mixing and mastering. However, technological advances could lead to AI becoming more than just a tool and more of a threat to like the jobs for people. According to a report, 70% of companies will have adopted at least one AI tech by 2030. Some of the benefits and deficits are it's quick and efficient. So as humans are like always in constant demand for like new stuff, wanting this is a good way to like deal with that. It's free, and there's no copyright protection for what's created by a machine. This has its benefits and deficits, however. Deficits, it can't create anything new, so it like takes stuff from pre-existing stuff. So there isn't much originality. I think it devalues artists' creativity, like using AI to copy an artist's sound till everyone is using it. So there is no real, you can't really be original before everyone's kind of copying your idea. Everything starts sounding the same, and people will start losing the capability of creating a song from scratch if you're always using AI. Like, it kind of, defeats the creativity balance. For the future, I think people will start like craving originality again. So I don't think AI will kind of like stop happening. I feel like it will still be there in the future, but maybe there'll be like an industry where humans kind of input emotion into it, like the human kind of side to it, because AI isn't really, it doesn't use emotion. So I feel like there'll be an industry where humans put like kind of the human factors into it. That's all I have for AI.
I think that's everything. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was a nice comprehensive coverage of the topic. from Team 3, is there anyone who'd like to add any points to that? Contribute any more?
I think with AI music, it just can't replace normal, like if you think of a genre like rock or anything that uses actual instruments and not like technology, every like hit on the drum or like riff played has its own little flair and like human emotion put into it. You just can't get that if you're like programming music onto AI. So it's just, it can't replace.
Is that how you feel about the Logic drummer?
Yeah.
It's hard to get feel, isn't it, with AI software?
Yeah.
Any other points anyone wants to add or make or ask?
Josh has got something.
Again, adding on to the AI thing, I've got a bit of a case study that I heard today, which I think is interesting and poses a lot of questions in terms of the law for copyright stuff and how I believe that the law around AI music is going to change drastically within the next 10 years. So David Guetta recently released a song using AI as a tool to recreate Eminem's voice and style of rapping to put over one of his songs. I heard a snippet of it on the radio today, and it is very, very, very close to what Eminem sounds like. Now, I don't know who was advising David Guetta, but I feel like this is a real bad move because notoriously Eminem has very good lawyers. And I'm not just saying that to be tongue-in-cheek. I think it's very dangerous to be messing around with stuff like that. I think it's good to be using AI as a tool, but when you're actively wanting to use AI tool to replace a real person that is alive.
And we're seeing that in the film industry.
Exactly.
We're there now.
It gets on quite shaky ground, I feel, because you are using the ideas of that person without their consent to recreate something as personal as their voice, as their own ideas, and it's regenerated by a computer. But then you can also use the other side of the argument that he didn't use it for the whole song, it was just to use it as a tool so he could get something else out of this track. So I kind of want to hear your views on that. What do we think? Obviously, there is pros and cons to AI music, but do we think the law is going to change in the next couple of years to combat this?
I feel like it's definitely going to like change because, like, yeah. I feel like it will change.
Well, we could. Well, like just to help you respond to that. I heard on the radio. There's you yourself as a young artist, Scarlett.
Yeah.
Right, got a nice voice and everything. Somebody could digitise you, your voice, your personality, the way you move, the way you look, and everything. And young impressionable artists say, "Yeah, okay, I'll take £1 million for that." Then they own you forever. Well, you might even take less money, but they've got the complete rights to you. There's ethical and moral issues to that. They own a complete AI copy of you. But that's what they're talking about in the film industry now. How do you feel about that?
I don't feel great. I don't know. I feel like Jacob, help.
I think it's already been used though. Like remixes, people use acapellas and that, and you get like, you have to get loyalties and that, and what loyalties? I don't know what
royalties.
Yeah, that's it. You have to get that and you have to ask to release the song. So I think it'll work like that more than.
You're saying it's not different to that.
Yeah, I don't think it won't be any different.
And is it different to Skip James just like taking the 200 quid and never getting a royalty for his music because he couldn't afford the train fare? It's exploitation.
I don't think that would happen. So that's not really happening anymore.
Isn't it?
Not really.
Do we not have The Voice and stuff where you get paid £1 and you can't earn any money for music for 25 years?
Yeah, but
People still do that.
Die out anyway because people are moving away from watching TV anyway, aren't they?
Do we think people are going to start taking artists to court over AI voices? This the whole thing with the David Guetta thing was interesting. He specifically said he wanted it to sound like Eminem and he wanted it to sound like his style, but he hasn't come out and said that he got his permission from him. Hasn't come out and said that he's got an okay from him to do that.
Especially considering he's still alive and like Eminem's still making music. Like,
yeah.
That's just completely copying his style and like his like
Exactly. Yes.
I think it really shows where the music industry is at the moment. I think after COVID, I think trends as a whole are all over the place at the moment. I mean, if you look at the fashion industry, like there's no massive trend at the moment. It's all over the place. People are recycling trends, people are coming up with new weird trends, and I think that really shows in the music industry. And I think there is also a lack of creativity in the music industry at the moment, with people reusing, obviously, AI generated stuff. And I think, like, it could have been, if David Guetta wanted to have a track that sounded very much like Eminem, then ask Eminem to be on your track, or something like that. Like talk to people. I think that is, if you want to AI generate something that sounds very much like someone else, then talk to them. Be like, how did you get your sound? I want to have that on my track. And I think it could just be avoided. I think it's really unnecessary.
Well, with AI music, it cuts. So with the Dave Guetta, it cuts Eminem out of. Well, he doesn't get the money for it, and his voice, because as he said, he wanted it to sound as similar as possible. His voice is being taken and used on a track, so it sounds like Eminem is on this track, but he is not getting any cut for this, and I think that's where it's going to start going. Like legal actions will be taken with AI music, where other artists will will use this AI to mimic the sound of other big artists' voices and not cut them in on profits, because people could just listen to get a song for Eminem because they're like, oh, I love Eminem, and let's hear his verse, and then they get into it each time, and it could bring in a lot of revenue like that and boost popularity to the song, get more listens because there's a Eminem feature, but it's not actually Eminem, and he's not gonna be getting like royalties or money from like streams and whatnot. But then again, I'd counter that as well, and I'd say that it can be useful for musicians who aren't as well known, and they can release these songs and have this AI on it, and it sounds like they've got that on the song. It could be more as a I'd still say, because I personally wouldn't want to take a big artist and release it on a song that's being played on the radio and then get all the credit for it. I would want to share and split the money with the artist and ask for permission and consent. So with young artists though, and if they want these big artists and they're not well known, these big artists won't know who they are and they won't give them the chance to feature them. So it could be used as a way for people who aren't as well known to get bigger artists on their tracks and see what it sounds like.
I was going to say that AI music can come into like ethical decisions. So as you were saying about David Guetta and Eminem, I think that comes in lawfully but also ethically. So like David Guetta had that decision in his mind, like, do I do this or do I not? And he chose to do it. And I think that might be a big participation in music creation as like AI goes forward. I think like, especially, obviously Eminem's alive, but I think if someone tried to recreate Michael Jackson's voice, I think that might be a whole different story because he's obviously dead and all the stories about him. I think AI music is going to be quite an ethical thing, whether they remove it completely or whether they add laws in or whatever. It stretches out quite broadly.
And I think that's general, isn't it? Like AI technology is going to be a massive development in our socio-economic system, in our technological systems. You know, this always happens. New technology ends up becoming something in our pocket. Eventually, it becomes mainstream. It becomes the way we do things. And in the music industry, you know, the idea when people were going into Sun Records to record, the idea that people would be in their homes making music on computers, on a phone, you know, in the future might have seemed absurd, but it's happened, and that's where we are, you know. And I think AI, I'm going to be provocative again. I think AI is the future of music production. It will be, inevitably, and people will adapt their artistry to suit the means of the technology, as we've seen over and over again. And I think in terms of the law and the ethics, big cases will come up and that will shape the law.
Like, here's the new John Lennon AI album.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Exactly.
How would you feel about that? How are we doing for time for the last group?
Yeah, we're okay. Yeah, we'll be all right. Anyone want, just on that last thing, I'm telling you that AI is the future. What do you think?
I think so if they do make laws to protect like artists with AI music, I think they'll be very similar to like the existing copyright laws. So like they might make it so like you can't use living artists, but you can use a dead artist's voice after like a certain amount of time after they've died.
Right.
Like with like the current copyright laws, I think it'd be similar to that.
Yeah, they're bound to use existing models, aren't they, as a way to determine these things.
I don't think people would like AI music in the same way, like the consumers, because it sounds the same as all the other music. Like there won't be anything different about it or creative about it.
Yeah,
So otherwise it would just all sound the same, wouldn't it? So you might as well listen to the same song on repeat.
Okay, I'm loving all the hands that are going up. We need to make short, succinct points if we're going, because we just need to move on to the final thing.
I was just going to say that, like, talking about using artists that are dead, like, as, like, recreating their kind of stuff with AI. Can you, like, imagine, like, it just doesn't really sit right. Can you imagine, like, oh yeah, this is the new, like, Elliott Smith album, but it's not Elliott Smith because he's dead. And it's like, but it's his voice and it's his songwriting. It just doesn't sit right.
It's interesting though how things that you couldn't imagine being acceptable or palatable become acceptable, through, the developments of market, technology and society. Who knows?
I was going to argue Jacob's point and say that you said there's a lack of creativity with AI music. I'd say that there can be a sense of creativity to it. Getting this. If you're into the AI music and you're making it all yourself or whatever, and you figure out where you need to put this AI bit of music into your song, you can incorporate it in a creative way. So just because you aren't producing the lyrics and the music itself, like the vocals, because it's someone else obviously, you can still incorporate it into your songs in a creative way. And the way you structure your songs can be creative still, and you can put this in and that you can still have creativity in your song. So I wouldn't say it's removing all creativity, and you said it will sound the same, but again I don't think it will sound the same with different artists when it comes to mimicking their voices.
It'll become an art in itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting, like a traditional instrumentalist might think the use of a MIDI track to be not very creative.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think. Sorry, it's got to go throat. I think overall it's going to go really popular and then it's just going to come straight back down, plummet into a pit of fire.
Flash in the pan.
Despair.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like, oh my god, AI music is so cool, and then it's going to be like, nah. Yeah, that's what we've got.
Well, that leads us
That's
really
good.
nicely onto the last point and the last team, which is revivals and trends, the vinyl revival. Well, this is interesting. We're going from AI, and you're talking about things coming back around. It will go up and then it will dip back.
Yeah.
It's kind of cyclical, isn't it? So that brings us nicely into our last point. So team 4, take it away.
So, I'm going to start by talking about the vinyl revival. So, with that, as we were saying, just a minute ago, like things come back round all the time, in music and also in other industries, and especially with vinyl, I think that's a really positive thing to come back around, because I think vinyl is a great way of listening to music, and it encourages kind of active listening more so than kind of just putting it on your phone, because it's a whole listening experience. You've got to kind of like go out and get the record and then take it out of the box and out of the sleeve and onto the thing. and you put it on, and it's a process, and then you'll sit and you'll listen to it, and you'll really think like, whoa, like this is what music would sound like before, because vinyl, you know, famously has a different sound. And I think maybe people are starting to kind of realise the differences between the sound of vinyl and the sound of things like Spotify and things. I mean, of course, Spotify is still like a huge part of the way we listen to music, but I think that, you know, vinyl is also kind of growing in popularity, and it's a really good thing for that to happen. What else was I going to say? I think, yeah, I mean, there is an argument though, there is an argument that, you know, maybe vinyl it takes a lot of energy to produce and to make. But having said that, I think because it is so, once you've made it and that takes energy and resources and stuff, which I guess isn't great for the environment. However, once that record is made and it's been, you know, someone's gone and bought it, as long as they look after it as well as they can, you know, that record can be handed down from person to person to person. It could last for ages, like for so many years, as long as you know the right way to kind of care for them. And I think so. It does have an element of sustainability. It's not completely sustainable, but it's a thing that could be reused and repurposed even, because a lot of people, you know, once a record is like really broken, they might, you know, chop it up and make it into something else, or like with like, I saw these things at Glastonbury Festival, people were like selling these things made of vinyl records before, which was quite cool. And shall I hand it over to you?
Yeah. The cassette mixtapes. Like recent years between 2020 and 2021, the sales had nearly doubled from 173k to 343k. The sales of cassette tapes in the US increased by double-digit percentage in recent years, and now numbers are on six-figure annually. The cassettes are fairly cheap, which could mean more of them can get sold, more of them rather than the more expensive ways to listen to music, for example Spotify or Apple Music. Also, some people keep cassette tape sets for sentimental value, which could mean it gets passed down the generation. It's not just what it sounds like, but the whole experience behind listening to it, like the more feeling, the familiarity reminds them of old memories. Like it only costs about $1.50 to produce, like make them a really strong option for labels and artists. They're also great for consumers because you can buy a new cassette for $10 instead of $25 on vinyl. And like, although it can be quite fuzzy and low quality, some people might prefer that. And then the streaming playlist, there's like different types of playlists, like Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, Apple Music, and Bandcamp. And the audience can create their playlist and choose a variety of the songs they want to be put onto their playlist of songs. And you can look up different types of playlists that artists have created, and they can be like interest you on the playlist they have created. And cost of making it is about $0.003 to $0.005 per stream on average. And then will CDs come back? Although unlikely, there are arguments saying that it very well could. And then the sustainability and the ecological energy used to in streaming is problematic. And then Spotify carbon footprint estimates an hour of media streaming in around 55 grams carbon dioxide equivalent. And about seed is over 3 times that. And then by 2010, cars sold in the US with CD players. And then by around 2012, Apple shipped the last MacBooks with internal CD drives. Any questions? Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to comment on what Mayor said earlier about the sustainability of vinyls. So you said that once they've been made, that's really it, and I agree with that, because with streaming, think about the servers that have to run all of these streaming platforms. Like someone said earlier, it's like 460 million users on Spotify.
Yeah.
And so these server rooms must have to be massive, and they're always having to run because they're always listening to music on their phone, and there's much more. It's easier to listen to music on your phone than it is on vinyl. So people will be doing that throughout the day, and these big servers running at these insane speeds, they'll be using a lot of energy. So I could say that vinyls can be more sustainable in the fact that once they're made, like you said, if you keep them in pristine condition, you just pass them down.
Yeah,
So.
in the long term, yeah. And also that kind of leads me to the other point. If I could just so also what I was going to say, I don't remember whether I've said it or not, but I'll just say it again. So also with vinyl, because people are starting to move towards listening to albums again now, they might make the decision to buy it on vinyl instead of just have the album, because people, going back to what I said earlier, they're starting to sort of notice the difference in feel and sound between the streaming services and vinyl and stuff. So people are, and these big albums, the bigger sort of more concept albums almost, those are quite good on vinyl, and things like that they'll be wanting to get more of a whole listening experience, like with, I guess even with Adele's 30, I'd imagine that would be very good on a whole thing, because you can't, with vinyl you can't skip it really unless you're really precise. And famously she made it so you can't skip the tracks you can't do shuffle play on Spotify, and I think that's a good thing about vinyl as well. Like, it's more of a whole thing, as I was saying earlier.
Do you mind if I interject?
Yes, sure.
So you're talking about the listening experience, aren't you? The listening experience. It goes back to what Zena was saying about the experience of live performance.
Yeah.
There is a want for that, and I think maybe we need to steer things back to that in some ways as music industry professionals. There is something lost in the convenience of fast food Spotify.
But also the album makes you listen to stuff that you might not like at first, and it's difficult. I can remember when I got a cassette album, this album I loved, it was a bought cassette, so they punched the tabs out so you can't record over it. But the last track on the album, I used to run over and stop it because it used to make me feel really weird. I hated that last track. And I actually stuck sellotape over it and recorded over that last track and erased it from the album. That's how much I hated that track of this album I loved. But now I've got a CD and a record version. It's like, oh, why did that track ever bother me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Babe, this is a quick point, so I want to open up for more people to contribute.
It's a more, you keep talking about the experience, but it's more of a sought after experience, because vinyls aren't accessible to everyone. Where I'd say, like in the room, more people here are going to have a phone than they are going to have a vinyl, and rather than paying your set price for the vinyl player, which I'm not sure how much it'd be, and then you're buying your vinyls as well. It's a much more of an investment than rather than just paying like $8.99 a month on Spotify Premium to listen to. So if you're in it for the experience, I can see why you'd do it, but it is much more of a sought after experience that most people would like. They'll just say, "Oh, I'll just listen to some Spotify. It's cheaper, it's quicker, and more convenient. I don't have to be at home or wherever your vinyl player is. You can do it on the go on mobile."
Okay.
That comes full circle as well when we're talking about live performance as well. It's the same thing. It's that battle between if it's convenient to if we actually want to go and do it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're coming down to. I think I'll find it a lot here.
So I'd like to open up just quickly to the groups here. What can we learn from the vinyl revival potentially about the future of music?
History always like repeats itself, doesn't it? So we could see like what they were talking about with the CDs, like the CDs could come back in a couple of decades maybe, like.
So maybe if you want to predict the future of music, have a little look at the past as well, because that can give you. So in terms of you forging your directions, your careers, look at what's been.
Yeah.
Because that might be a good indicator of what's to come. Yeah, great.
I've got a friend who's putting CDs in a C crate, and he's waiting for them to go up in value because people are giving them away. Storage.
Storage. Oh yeah, storage unit. Okay, any more thoughts on how these kind of trends and the return of these kind of trends, the revival of different trends, how that might play out in the future?
Well, yeah, like you said, we're seeing vinyls. They're a much more of an older thing, and they're now going back into trend. So it can be the same now. What's like our younger generation's trend right now could fall out. So like with AI music, it's popping off now, and like you were saying, Dan, about it being in movies, and in 10 years down the line, it could be the big thing that everyone wants to do, and then it could fall out of fashion, and then when we're in our 70s, it could revive again and come back right through, like it's happening with vinyls right now. They fell out of fashion, and everyone's going back in because they want this experience which is like more, gives them more memories and sounds nicer, doesn't it?
Okay, on to our last point of the conference, and then we'll wrap up.
I think like the plates will come back in, like exclusives, where like, cause like there was one like reggae, and then they made like exclusive songs, and like only one person had it. I think that would come back in with vinyl. Because like one person had a USB for his album, he threw it out. I think it was 3 of them actually. You threw them out, so I think that would come back in, like the old days.
Okay, so thanks everyone for that. Big round of applause for our speaker.